Hello everyone and welcome today to RMIT's talk, Victoria's Big Build and How to Get Involved. My name is Melissa Tinetti. I'm the Associate Director of the Built Environment and Sustainability here at RMIT in the College of Vocational Education. Before we kick off today's discussion, I'd really like to acknowledge the people of the Wurrung and Burrung language groups of the Eastern Kulin Nations, on whose unceded lands we conduct the business of the university today. RMIT respectfully acknowledges their ancestors and elders past and present and emerging. And while we conduct our work remotely, I want to pay my respect to the wider unceded lands of this nation. Now, we're all here tonight to discuss Victoria's Big Build, and what does that even mean? Well, the Big Build is a reference to all major road and rail projects that are set to transform the way that we travel in our state of Victoria. Some of these projects are really exciting, and some of these projects include the Melbourne Metro Tunnel and the Regional Rail Revival, the North East Link and Melbourne Airport Rail. And there's so many more. They're just a few of the ones that we're very interested to talk to you about tonight. These major projects have been designed to accommodate and expect 10 million people who will be living in Victoria by 2051. Just to give you a bit of a quote tonight from some information on the Big Build website with regards to the North East Link project, the missing link in Melbourne's freeway network. So we will need lots of local trades, including plumbers, electricians, landscapers, gardeners, bricklayers and concreters, labour hire, traffic management, training providers, steel and safety gear, pipes and hoses, electric cables, waste collection, construction machinery, and so much more. That's really just scratching the surface of what Victoria's Big Build will include. So to discuss the potential opportunities that this brings to an incoming workforce, I've got some of my RMIT colleagues here tonight to open this up a little bit more with you. So I'd like to welcome our panel members. We've got Michael Goss from our Building Design Group, Matthew Sweeney from Building and Land Management, Sebastian LaRocca, who's here to represent our plumbing and our carpentry teams, and Kevin Flynn from the electrical, refrigeration and instrumentation areas. So just before we kick off too far into this, a bit of housekeeping for you. I just want to let you know that we'll have 15 to 20 minutes at the end of our panel discussion tonight to go over some questions from the audience. If you can submit these in the QA tool on the right of your screen at any time, we'll do our best to answer those for you tonight. So I'm going to kick off over to Michael. Now, Michael, you've been looking after our vocational building design programs for a number of years in varying capacities. You've probably been at RMIT, I think, for over 10 years now. So I'd like to start with you and a question for you. From our design building perspective, we're going to walk through a bit of our projects and what the ground up looks like tonight. So we'll start with you, Michael. So can you tell us what happens at the beginning of a big build project like a Melbourne Metro Tunnel, for example, and at what point does the building designer get involved? Over to you, Michael.
Thanks, Mel, and welcome everyone. When you look at these major government infrastructure projects like Big Build, it's multifaceted in nature. So there's some that are very specific to big earth-moving projects, but there are a range of smaller ones as well. So you see the high-profile major works, such as Westgate Tunnel and suburban train level crossing replacements, etc. But Big Build also includes smaller targeted building projects for communities impacted by major projects themselves, or more generally to meet other community needs, such as when you look in the Big Build suite of things, there's things like a multicultural community hub, community writing centre, soccer club facilities for growth in the participation by youth and women, and a community arts house. So architects and building designers are normally engaged for major components of major projects. Smaller ones tend to fall more in the building design area. Our graduates, they work in large and small architectural firms, providing technical expertise in areas of building technology and in the application of complex design and building documentation software. And they're pretty nifty at producing some incredible images that give people an insight into what some of these projects might look like. In terms of the involvement of building designers, it normally is from the inception of a project through to completion of the building works. So architects and building designers interpret the client brief that outlines the requirements for the project. It can be given by a single client, or it can be established through working with a client group or even a community group and coming to find out what their needs are. Then a design response is developed using a range of sophisticated design and presentation software platforms to prepare these wonderful 2D and 3D presentations so that the client can be part of the journey, interpret what's about to happen, and participate in the discussion and the approval process that it's what they need. The design is then further developed through liaising with the builder and specialist consultants, and there's a whole range of those that get involved in major projects. So we have interior designers, structural engineers, surveyors, mechanical service and hydraulic service experts, and landscape designers. And that's all coordinated through documentation to get planning approvals that we present to government authorities. Then documentation and drawings are prepared to meet Australian standards and regulatory requirements in order to obtain building permits and provide instructions for the building process. Building designers and architects also communicate with the builder and respond to requests for further information or modifications during the construction process, right through to the final completion. So it's very much a partnership that the designers, the architects, the building designers and builders participate in. Our graduates are developed to have current design and documentation knowledge and skills that enable them to work across a diverse range of large and small scale projects. The design and construction industry is exciting, and you can see that in the big build projects. They're complex in nature, and it's exciting when you think about any of the possible building types, whether it's buildings around a suburban station, whether it's schools, hospitals, high-rise apartments, prisons, churches, fun parks. It can be anything, and the list goes on. So it's a wonderfully diverse and challenging profession. The challenges include coming up with innovative design responses that meet the specific project needs, but they need to be sustainable and they need to make the best use of technology available. So we have our graduates placed in these large architectural practices as documentation managers and architectural technicians who provide the story, the communication about how these buildings will evolve and eventually be built. We also have graduates who are registered building designers who run their own practice and projects, almost all of which are local, but occasionally some of those are overseas. And my background has been a little bit of that. So I've worked on multi-storey apartments in the CBD and East Melbourne. I've been participated in the design and construction of TAFE colleges, private houses and alterations and additions, prisons, fun parks, the built environment for those, right down to sustainability issues like mud brick housing and alternative systems. So it's a wonderful profession to be in. These big build projects bring multifaceted approaches on the very macro big scale right down to the smaller scale and community scale, which touches a lot of lives in the process. So Mel, I hope that gives a little bit of background about the building process and the potential engagement for building design graduates, the many and varied projects as part of Victoria's Big Build.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you, Michael, so much for sharing the building design experience with us. And I guess that's an area that's close to my heart, and it always will be. So I guess now that we've hypothetically done a building design, the next step is to hypothetically hand it over to our building surveyors. So our building surveyors, we have 3 programs for surveying at RMIT that are very well recognised in industry. So once our hypothetical building plans have been passed across to our surveyor, the surveyor would then at that point get involved and start mapping it out on site. So the surveyor is obviously responsible for a number of things. The first thing is setting out all of the actual building and the points for the building, setting out some of the contours, starting to set out drainage, and they install some very critical points on their building sites that are picked up by the rest of the trades as they come through. So very important as a surveyor. They start as surveying assistants, and then they move through programs and become registered surveyors. So before I talk a little bit more about that, or let's pick up some of those points, we might pass over to Sam. And now, Sam, you've worked on a domestic and large-scale commercial building projects in the plumbing industry for 27 years, and you've been an educator at RMIT for 11 years now. So you've got lots of experience, but when that expertise of a plumber or a carpenter is out there, when do they actually need to come into a big build project? Do you think you could give us a bit of insight into that? And do you think you could give us a bit of knowledge on what it might look like to be a young tradie who's working in a team on a large scale project? Thanks, Sam.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa, and hi everyone. Welcome. With any big build, obviously the services play a very important part in the actual building itself. We come along at a point fairly early in the piece before most of the trades are actually on the ground, at a time when potentially the hoarding is just going up, there might be a gantry just going up, before any earthworks are actually commenced. There's generally a lot of services, below ground services, sometimes above ground services that could need relocating, disconnection, anything of that nature there. Once those type of services have been identified and dealt with, there's the actual setting up of the temporary services, which house staff and people who are working on the actual sites themselves. And through that, the building starts to progress with the cooperation of all the other trades involved, starting from your bulk excavations right down to the bottom basement levels, and in conjunction then with your surveyors, as you just spoke about a moment ago, surveyors start to plot all their points. We generally would use a lot of those markings as grid lines, and off those grid lines is where we start to take off all of our plotting of our, whether it be our stack work and so forth. And we start to follow the building from the ground upwards. How this works with a lot of the younger tradesmen coming through, a lot of it starts pretty early in the piece when they're actually apprentices. During their time as an apprentice, they would generally hopefully have done a pre-apprenticeship. It gives them a lot of grounding knowledge and basic knowledge as well as to what to look for and what to expect and how to work in conjunction with qualified tradesmen. At RMIT, we generally try to look at any facet of the plumbing industry, and in a small scale, we replicate everything that a plumber is expected to know and do on a construction site. And we do this in a sequence over a 3-year period where they start off with very basic installation systems, right up to some very complex systems that are generally used on large-scale construction sites.
That was great insight. Thank you so much, Sam.
Thank you.
No worries. So hypothetically, we've done a building design, we've started our surveying, we've set out our building site, plumbers have come in and started their drainage. We've got some structure, some carpenters coming in, starting up some framing, etc. It's now time to bring our electricians or our other services in, so our electricians and our refrigeration mechanics. So they're coming across now to start working on our project. So Kevin's going to help me out here. So Kevin, you worked as an electrician for 24 years and you've been a teacher since 2006 at TAFEs here in Australia and in the UK. So during your experience working in large-scale industrial installations, which incidentally includes the Channel Tunnel from England to France, no, he didn't dig it by himself. What kind of work did you do? And still, does this work remain relevant to the modern day projects, such as our North East Link project? Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, Mel. Yeah, it's very relevant as far as the tunnel is concerned. It's the same tunnel boring machines that we use to build the Channel Tunnel that's being used to build all the tunnels in Melbourne here as well. So on that side of it, first of all, my area covers the electrical, refrig and instrumentation. So first thing that we've got to remember is that all of these trades will be somewhere along the builds of the tunnels. If we start off with the electrical, first of all, just like Sebastian said, we've got a pre-app program which leads into an apprenticeship program, hopefully. These pre-apps, first of all, will learn the basics and get a white card and CPR, learn basic tools, some wiring techniques, that sort of stuff. And then hopefully they'll get an apprenticeship as an electrician and move on into that. Similar to the plumbers, we need to get the services in via conduits and pipes into the ground before any concrete's poured to go to the points and stuff like that. There's also electricians that go in and put in temporary services, even for things like canteen for the workers, all the temporary lights, all that sort of stuff. So that's one particular area that they'll do while the others are building the tunnel. That goes ahead as well. The same as the refrigeration people, they've got to build in all of their main pipe work for the air conditioning, because we're not talking about domestic air conditioning here, we're talking about large air conditioning units. And even for some of the control systems, you might get instrumentation technicians in to control float levels and stuff like this, because a lot of these tunnels are under the water. So you're going to have, just like the Channel Tunnel, water ingress all the time, and that's going to be pumped and recorded and looked after by all of this instrumentation as well. So with the difference between the Channel Tunnel and the Melbourne tunnels, for instance, you will be able to get up for air now and again. When I was in the Channel Tunnel for 12-hour shifts, 11 days on and 3 days off, you literally went down for 12 hours and you came up. And it was nighttime if you were doing the nighttime shift, and you just sleep during the day. And if you were on the daytime shift, you wouldn't see daylight at all, let alone sunlight, which only happens once in a while in Britain anyway. So to say that I was white as a ghost after 9 months was an understatement. Also, the difference between the UK, which was regulated as far as safety was concerned, once we went across to the France side of it, there was a big door. We went across and they were drinking wine, wearing trainers, wearing jeans, smoking, reading the newspaper. Whereas in Britain, we were going around like moon men with hard hats, safety goggles, boots, self-rescuers, because if there was a fire in the tunnel, you needed to have some airflow. So it was difference between night and day. Now, with the tunnels, you've got to remember that not only rail tunnels, which will also have different type of wiring to it as well, you're going to have the road tunnels. And what people don't realise as well with the big build is that home building, it's a big build on homes as well. We're talking primarily about tunnels here, but we've also got a lot of home building as well. Now, when the Channel Tunnel started up, obviously that was where the big money was. And greedy electricians like myself thought, this is where I'm going to earn plenty of money. This will happen here as well, like what happened on the desal plant down in Victoria. All the electricians headed down that way. That then opened up a huge gap in the market. So therefore, anybody that didn't want to become a tradesman all of a sudden saw this big niche, and obviously there was a lot of money in even home building and stuff like that. So that opened the market up as well. So for TAFEs like us, we need to be prepared, and we are prepared. We're one of the biggest schools around there for all of these trades to accept not only for the main build of the tunnels, we're going to have a lot of domestic type sparkies and air conditioning people as well. So a lot of people are not aware of that as well. With the instrumentation side of it, once you've done an electrician's Cert 3 course and got your A grade, you can then go in to do the Cert 4 with the Instro as well, which is another notch to your belt, and you can go off on big projects and earn plenty of money there. If you want to do a dual trade, you can just use some of those skills and go transfer across to the refrig area, and vice versa. They can come over onto the electrical side as well. So you get a dual trade. With the big Channel Tunnel site project, what you've got is different trades, and it'll be the same in our Victoria tunnels, where you might start off as an electrician, you get on that job for several years, you become a supervisor or foreman, and then you go and do a Cert 4, and it might be in project management, building design, stuff like that. Once you sort of start mixing with these other trades and you start mingling with the foreman and stuff like that, you do tend to be dragged into other areas. I ended up on the mechanical team, and I stayed there. I was the last electrician to be sort of let go from the Channel Tunnel, even though I wanted to go early because it wasn't a good job as such, good paying but not good conditions. And so you might end up going into like a project manager and stuff like that. So we've got all of those trades that they can go into. And you've got to remember that once you've done your pre-app, that's the route in. So you've got to start off hopefully as a pre-app. That will get you a job with one of the tradesmen. Then you go on and you can do dual trades, or you can do a Cert 4, or you can do a diploma and move on from there.
That's great. Great insight. Thank you so much for sharing with us, Kevin. So just a quick, back to our housekeeping again, just a quick reminder that we've got a live Q&A tool that's open for you to put some questions in. So if you've got some questions for us, we'd love to answer them. Please put them in the chat function on the right-hand side. And if we don't get to them through this discussion, we will definitely get to them at the end. So thanks again, Kevin. Thanks for sharing your insight, and very interesting hearing about the tunnel work that you've been working on as well. So we're going to move across to Matthew now. So Matthew's going to share with us some experience of the building and construction area. Matthew came through our building and construction program as a student, graduated, and then worked in the building industry for a couple of years before returning back as one of our fantastic teachers. So Matt, can you tell us a bit about some of the recent graduates in the building and construction area? Because you've been in there for 6 years now, so you've had a bit of experience with some of our students that have graduated and moved on to other bachelor programs. What kind of skills are needed to be successful in this building industry, and where are you seeing some of our graduates finding their work now? Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Mel. Yeah, I've had the privilege of being able to see a lot of our students make their way through and kept in contact with a lot of them, seeing what their careers have turned into. And I have to admit, I've been very impressed with the outcomes with a lot of our students. We've seen students make their way through cadet programs with larger builders, so getting involved with big construction companies, the kinds of companies that build massive multi-million-dollar or billion-dollar projects, the high-rises that we all love to look at in the city, all the way through to now increasingly our large civil construction projects like those involved with our big build. So it's been awesome to see our students make that progress, starting out in a diploma building and construction and learning those skill sets that perhaps they didn't really understand first of all, but then as they've developed that skill set and then realized what their true passion is and realized what they want to do, making their way into the cadetship programs with other companies, or moving into even the degree programs to move on to become either a construction manager or project manager, depending on what they want to do. So one of the biggest skill sets then that a student or even a person wanting to move into this career would need, I would say, from my experience, is definitely problem solving. The construction industry is one big puzzle piece, or one big puzzle. We're bringing together a whole lot of different parts, different expertise, and we need to recognize that our job as a project manager, not a program manager, a project manager or builder, is to bring together all these different expertise, not to think that we are the experts, but rather recognize everyone for the value that they bring to a project, and then help to coordinate them to make sure that the project is successful. So that means engaging and working with our trades, our architects, our clients, government, anyone who has a vested interest in our project, and ensuring that they all work collaboratively to get the project done. And then when there's problems, being able to overcome them within the restrictions that we have that govern our industry, not being able to just make up solutions as we maybe perhaps would like in an ideal world, we do need to recognise that there are rules that govern how we operate in the industry, and we need to be able to work and problem solve within those rules. Another thing is we do have to be hardworking. Construction industry is notorious for its long hours, but obviously we get to be involved with some pretty amazing projects, and that comes through with our passion. So if we're passionate about our industry, then the hard work comes easy. And then finally, we also need to be good communicators. Increasingly in our globalized world, we work with people from all the way on the other side of the planet. Suppliers might be in China, engineers might be in Europe. So we need to work with these different people in order to be able to make the project successful. So being a good communicator, a good problem solver, and a hard worker definitely means we're going to get and have a successful career. Many of our students start out with our program, and we have a bit of a 50-50 split with the outcomes that our students enjoy. Many of them go on into our bachelor programs, which are well thought of within our industry. They either go and do construction management or project management, and then begin cadetships with either large civil construction firms or even large commercial construction firms working on high rises or on large civil construction projects like those involved with a big build. The other half of our students tend to go into our domestic sector, which is also experiencing a large amount of growth as we see people moving into the civil construction industry. So many of them work out as either contracts administrators, estimators, or even supervisors initially. And as they gain that experience, they eventually end up going into get their builder's registration and starting their own businesses and becoming builders themselves. And we've even seen many of our graduates now with a nice building company name that goes along with their name, not just a qualification. So it's been great to see the successful outcomes that many of our students have been able to enjoy.
Thank you, Matthew. Wonderful insight. And, you know, I guess I can't promote that program any more than you just did. So thank you very much. We've got a couple of questions that are coming through, so thank you so much. But I might throw this one across to the panel. And our questions come in, and it's, what should I do to prepare before coming to study building at RMIT? Do you have any specific advice for me? So it's probably one really for Matthew, maybe, or Michael. Go for it.
I guess I'll jump in first. I guess if you're studying building and construction, there's not too much that you need to do yet. However, we'd always strongly encourage our students to see if they can get some sort of work experience or work placement with a builder, whether that's supervising or you're starting out just as a labourer or to help out on site, or any opportunity where you can learn from someone who's already in the industry. That really informs you about what you're learning or what you're learning as you go along. And also be sure of what you're there to achieve. Many of our students sometimes can not be aware of what they want to do. They might think of being a builder as having a tool belt on, but many of our students end up becoming builders themselves, not realizing that builders very rarely get to put the tool belts on these days. They spend a lot of time coordinating people and preparing project schedules and looking after budgets and writing up contracts. So as long as we're aware of that, then obviously we're going to be successful and passionate from day one.
Absolutely. Thank you, Matt. Another question, Michael, we might throw this one to you. So the subjects in the building design, are they aligned with some other architectural courses at RMIT? So I guess we're asking, is there a pathway there as well? Could you share a bit more of your insight into that?
Yes, yes, Melissa, there is a distinct connection between the two programs. So in the building design program, there are a suite of courses that directly translate to the bachelor program. It's the similar content, and students who are successful in making that transition from building design to an architectural program, they look at those courses and they're given credit for those courses that they've completed in the building design program. So you're looking at things like construction, presentation, communication, those sort of general areas that overlap between the two programs. Design is another one. So many of our students have that aspiration to make that transition from the vocational space into the higher education space. They're very successful when they do it, and the preparation that they have in that program, from the feedback we get from the degree program, is that they tend to excel because of the foundation they've done in the vocational program.
Wonderful. Thanks, Michael. And I guess a question I've got for all of you is, what's the best piece of advice that you could give a year 10, 11 or 12 student right now who might be interested in getting into building and construction, building design or trades?
I'll answer that one if you want, Mel.
Go for it, Kev.
If you look at the situation that Victoria and the rest of Australia is in at the moment with the pandemic, the one thing that's been going ahead in general has been all of the construction and the trades industry. Whereas you see some of the poor people out there who've lost their jobs, got no income, relying on government handouts. If you do have a trade, not only have you got skills for life to do your own projects and your family's projects, for instance, you've also got almost a guaranteed income because trades will never stop, because things will always be built. And as far as Victoria is, as far as Victoria is concerned, we're not in a boom and bust area like some of Queensland and Perth and stuff like that. The amount of people that are in Victoria and nearby New South Wales and stuff like that, the industries and the growth that we're going to have will keep growing and be sustainable. Because what you've also got to remember is the workforce that we've got at the moment. There's a huge amount of people coming up to retirement, and that's not been picked up quick enough by the trades that are going through, especially now that we've got the big building phase that we've got on at the moment. Like I say, it's not just tunnels, it's homes, it's businesses, everything else. Even though retail and stuff like that have really suffered, I don't think the building industry is anywhere near the pain that they've been in. So that's what I'd be telling year 10 or 12 students, that and also once you've got a trade, you can go into your construction project managing, so you can move off your tools and go into that. And then if worse comes to worse, you can become a teacher if all else fails and do that. So.
No worries. Thank you, Kevin. Would anyone else like to have a go at answering that question for us?
Melissa, it's Michael. I think it's about being proactive at that stage of your academic career. So be proactive in your investigation. Look around at projects under construction. As Matthew said, work placement if you can get it. Talk to people in the industry if you can and get their insights, like a bit like this evening where you're getting some insights from the various personalities into the various aspects of the building and design construction areas. So just be proactive.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Throw something
in. Matt. Go for it, Matt.
I guess something that I didn't realise when I was still studying that I wish I could go back in time and tell myself when I was still in year 10 and those grades, don't underestimate the value of mathematics and your literacy skills. Building is so much math and so much reading. I was young once and I thought, I don't really need to know too much about this stuff. I'm just going to go become a builder, thinking we didn't really need to know. But there is a lot of mathematics involved with construction. There's a lot of reading and understanding when it comes to construction. So don't underestimate the value in putting a bit of effort into those courses. It will make life a lot easier for you as you come and you study with us, learning the physics that are involved with construction and also the financial sides of things when it comes to mathematics.
No problems. Thanks, Matt. And I've got a question for you, Sam, because I know what your answer would be for the year 10, 11 and 12. It'd be the same as Kevin's. But the question I've got for you is around COVID and the disruption that COVID had on the whole trade industry. But it had a big change in education as well. And coming from a traditional trade like plumbing, can you share with us how the plumbing trade has adapted to, I guess, learning and teaching in a COVID environment? Thanks, Sam. Your mic's on mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, look, it's incredible what it has done for our department. COVID, I know it's not a great thing to happen, but it has forced our hand to move with the times. Just a little bit of a background: when I first started at RMIT, I found it quite antiquated in the systems that we were running. We're still teaching some of the old-fashioned styles of plumbing, still out of textbooks, and I couldn't believe that we're still teaching these kind of things to students. In the midst of that, when COVID first hit, we had already started transferring all of our assessment tools into a digital format. Come COVID, March 26th, I think it was, or 23rd, 2019, it kind of forced our hand to accelerate that program, where we totally digitised our entire course, and that was our Certificate 2, our Certificate 3 and our Certificate 4 program. It was an absolutely massive amount of work to update all of our resources. So one of the biggest benefits we've had, now we've moved to a model where we're running at 50% of it is online, 50% of it is in the practical workshop. With the online, we've been able to engage a lot more students online. I know it's taken a little bit to get used to. Some students have grasped it really well, other students have struggled with it a little, and we've all had to learn as it's gone along. For the students who now get to use our workshops twice as much as opposed to what we used to use them in the old system, so now we can run our workshops 5 days a week. With the fact that we're integral to the construction industry, we've been putting it through a lot of students. We've increased our capacity almost to a maximum, almost to a point where we need to think about looking at a bigger premises with the demand that is out there. So it's had an incredible impact, COVID, and we're still dealing with the day-to-day operations of it even as we speak.
Great. Wonderful. Thanks, Sam. We might get to some questions from our audience, if that's okay with everybody. And there's some really interesting ones coming in, so keep them coming. Thank you so much. I guess one of the really interesting questions I'm seeing in here is, how do we replicate a real construction site in an education setting? There's lots and lots of ways to do this, and I think the trade area probably has got some really quick answers, and so has the building and construction area. So Sam, do you want to, I know we've just been to you, but can you just share with us just really quickly what our education setting looks like at RMIT?
Sure. Well, with our workshops, we simulate almost every task that a plumber is required to do or required to know. So coming right from our Certificate 2 students up to our Certificate 3 students, we replicate every task. So we have a very large sandpit where we do excavation work, right down to close to the 2.5 metre mark. So we do trench shoring, we lay water mains, we lay sewer drains, stormwater drains, septic tanks, all of that kind of thing there. So we can quite easily replicate, not quite to the scale that, or to the scale on an actual construction job, but in a smaller scale. But we can replicate almost everything that we or that's required of a tradesman.
Great, thanks, Sam. Matt, do you want to tell us a bit about how we simulate that in building and construction?
Sure. We do something very similar to what Sam's brought out, is that we have some practical elements that we need to replicate and part of the learning process. So we have workshops that are set up with various elements of a construction site. We bring our students in, we have them run through the construction phase of different parts of a building, and we do this through a couple of different subjects that we teach, whether that's being surveying or structural principles, which are very interactive sessions. The teachers who run those courses are incredibly passionate and excited about it, and it gives the students the opportunity to see up close exactly how things go together and the way things work. So very similar to them, we replicate pretty much everything that we need to be able to replicate in a controlled environment Obviously, if we were working with a real construction site, I don't think many students would appreciate having to go out on a raining day and climb up some scaffolding, which would be a safety issue. So we basically replicate that environment in a controlled environment, such as a classroom, but we do everything to make it as close as possible to a real construction site.
Great. Thank you, Matt. And we've got another question here that's quite an interesting one for all of you. Are there many travel opportunities within the construction industry? Maybe Kevin?
All right. Yeah, there are. You can go all over the world. I've been to the Middle East in my job to do stuff. So once you've got your qualification, literally the world's your oyster. Especially an Australian qualification, it's recognised all over the world, and it's highly recognised and valued. So yeah, I would definitely say there's career opportunities. And there was, going back to another question earlier on, as far as the amount of women that are in trades, when I started my apprenticeship a few years ago, there was literally 0 female trades apprentices or even trades themselves. But now it's really taken off, and I'm over the moon with the amount of women/girls that come through. And then not necessarily always young girls, they're young mothers, and they're people in their 40s and 50s as well. So they're good on them. They're really giving it a go. And I think that the men on building sites are starting to accept them a lot more than they would have done 20 or 30 years ago.
Yeah, good answer, Kevin. Great answer. There's been some, just before we get to the next question, I know, a few years ago when we could travel, there were some plumbing projects that we had running as well with PICAC, one of the industry partners, where we did some projects over in India, a bit of a competition with some other countries where they were laying pipes, and there was some building and construction teachers there involved in that as well that were helping plan and project management of those projects, which were teaching and educating the local Indian people in how to, sanitise their spaces, which was a great initiative. Now, as far as women go in the building industry, we're a minority, unfortunately. We did manage over a few years ago, increase our female students in our building and construction program, which again was great. We were up to 10% of women, which it's probably dropped off a little bit now, but we're hoping to increase that. Michael, what are your female students in building design?
It'd be somewhere between 45 and 50%.
Yep, fantastic.
So they're very strong representation. And just picking up on the previous question about opportunities to travel, there's been a strong tendency for our graduates to head to the UK. This is prior to COVID, because it's the same language. The software generally is universal. So it's an easy translation or a transition into countries like that, and they do very well, and it gives them great experience to bring back to Australia when they complete their time there.
Yeah, fantastic. And Sam, we've got a couple of female plumbers.
Yes, we do. Unfortunately, not as much as I'd like to see in the industry, but we do have quite a few female students. And also we have some interest in some females who are thinking of teaching. So we're in the midst of working with them to see if we can bring them in as teachers also. Fantastic.
Yep. Great, thank you. So I guess another question I'd like to ask you all, which is from our audience, is what were some of the unexpected challenges along your career paths, and how did you overcome them? Might swing to you first, Michael. You look like you've contemplated an answer.
Not really. What were some of the challenges? I guess it's the unexpected nature of the building industry being as diverse as it is. I think your first initial thoughts are that it's something you know well, like housing, and that you might start there. But depending on where your initial threshold is into the industry, it can be quite confronting in terms of learning to be in a situation where you have an unfamiliar building type that you have to become familiar with. And that's where you lean on the more mature people in the office and the people around you start to add to the education you've had by daily support and mentoring through the process. In terms of how you got over it, it's just, I guess, being open, being adaptable, and responding as much as you can and learning as much as you can from the people around you.
Great, thank you. Would anyone else like to have a go at answering that question?
Can I have a go at that one?
Absolutely, go Kevin.
I'm old enough to remember the recession in Britain in the late 70s and early 80s, and I started off when I left school as an electronic engineer, and within a year I was unemployed. I didn't have a driving license, I didn't have a qualification, and I was literally on the dole for a year. So that's what started my path into becoming an electrician, because there was always a need for electricians. And over the period of my working life, there's been a few recessions and dips and stuff, but I've never really been out of work. It just meant I had to travel a bit further for work and sleep on floors and sleep in vans and that sort of stuff. But the way I look at it is it's made me who I am today and stronger, and it's given me a much better insight, especially going into my teaching role. I can relate to people from all different industries and different aspects of the electrical trade, because for the electricians, you're not just talking about house wirers or commercial or anything like that. You've also got comms people, data engineers, computer engineers that do all the wiring, all that sort of stuff. So there's so much change in our industry in the electrical side and the air conditioning side that it's been wonderful for me. Looking back on it, yeah, there are challenges in every, doesn't matter what job you've got, whether you're a teacher or a tradesperson, there's always going to be challenges. But I think the way the industry moves from decade to decade and even year to year, the speed that it's going at the moment, I think it's a wonderful opportunity to get in there and get your hands dirty.
Yeah, great answer. Sam?
Yeah, one of the biggest challenges I've had to face, and that was coming towards the end of my, not career, but my time on a construction site through adversity. I had to make a decision on what to do next in my career. And of course, teaching was probably one of the obvious ones. So to go back to school, let's say, and learn how to, write essays and just think outside the square, because that's what it took for me to sort of jump out of my comfort zone and get into the teaching industry, which led me to RMIT. And so that was the biggest experience I've had over the last probably 12, 13 years.
Great, thanks, Sam. Matthew, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I was worried you're going to come to me.
Sorry.
I'm probably the youngest one out of all of us. I don't think I can complain about too much adversity, because I don't think I've lived long enough to appreciate too much adversity. I guess the real challenge I saw in the industry, which has changed a lot recently because of specific efforts by not Fair Work, but WorkSafe, and the emphasis on mental well-being. Many perhaps have the idea that the construction industry is a rough and ready kind of environment, that we can expect to have to, put up with some pretty difficult situations in the sense of behaviour of other colleagues that we would consider as being inappropriate in any other environments. And I remember when I was still in the industry working in that faculty, that tended to be a bit of a difficult one to deal with myself personally. That has changed quite a lot with WorkCover and the government recognising that people's experience in the industry can, if it's negative, they end up leaving the industry and also having a negative impact on their lives. That has been a massive improvement. But yet that was something that I found personally was difficult to deal with. However, you do find coping mechanisms and you do learn how to handle individuals who are like that. But thankfully, I'd like to say that there's a lot fewer of those situations happening.
Sure. Thank you, Matt. We might wind up with a final question from our audience. So, and I might answer this one first, but the question is, do you think that you've ended up where you wanted to be in your career? Or have things changed, expanded or morphed during your career journey? Now, I guess for me, my career journey was, I was an architect. I worked as a commercial architect. I designed buildings. I worked with service engineers. I worked with clients. I ran site meetings on site. Now that's difficult as a female, let me tell you. And I guess I was away from design for a few years. I came back to design, and then I wanted to start teaching, and for me that morphed and I changed my direction into teaching, but I guess there's so many things that I do on a daily basis that I draw on my skills as an architect to manage things, to project manage projects, to manage outcomes on a daily basis. So I think whilst it's morphed and it is a new career, I think it's really exciting. So I'd like to hear from each of you as to what you think. Kevin?
Well, like I said, I started off as an electronic engineer, and thank God I didn't pursue that, because that would have been just boring me to tears. The electrical side of it was pretty fun. Going into teaching, I love the teaching side of it. The management side of it, yeah, would I have chosen it? Probably not. But it's made me, I think, a stronger person mentally and given me some skills that I never had before. So yeah, I'm pretty happy where I am in life at the moment, and yeah, I can't complain.
Great, thanks, Kevin. Sam, you're smiling at me like you're ready.
No, I'm not. No, well, yeah, my career sort of morphed into where I'm currently at the moment. But yeah, look, the camaraderie between myself and the students, so the teaching was probably the highlight of my term as a teacher. And I still have a really good connection to the students. I have a lot to do with them. They still pop in to see me quite often. Quite often get calls out of hours, wanting to know things, how to do things. So that's great. It's good to have contact with students who are out there doing it for themselves. Going back to thinking back to where I come from and did pretty much the same thing. But yeah, and then sort of going into the management side of things, it's challenging. I can say that.
But it's wonderful to be at RMIT, isn't it, Sam?
Of course it is, with a great team.
No worries. Thank you. Next on my screen is Matthew. Matthew, what can you tell us?
Well, I think answering that question, of course, things change through life, and what you want out of your career is going to change throughout life. Doors open, opportunities arise, doors open to me, opportunities arose to me, and I took them. And they've led me down a path that's ended me up where I am today. Do I regret any of it? Absolutely not. Is it where I envisaged myself 10 years ago? Probably not, but things changed along the way. And I made a decision then that I had a passion for teaching and working with others and teaching, helping them to develop the skills. And then when that opportunity arose, I took it. So I definitely think things change. And asking the question, have we ended up where we wanted to end up? Well, that also changes. Where we want to end up will change throughout our lives. So yeah, I do think things change and inevitably will be different to what we perhaps wanted when we were younger.
Absolutely. Thank you, Matthew. You did have some wonderful teachers too, I must admit, along the way that sort of morphed your journey into becoming a teacher. Michael, what can you share with us?
Melissa, I think just reflecting on it, teaching's probably taught me a lot. It makes you stop and think about what you do and why you do it and how you do it. And that was a big enlightenment when you have to tell someone else the best way of doing things. In teaching, working with colleagues from a diverse range of backgrounds, what they bring to a student cohort and share with the cohort, they want to give back, as I did. And it's a great thing when you can see students succeed. It's a real joy to see the students succeed around you. So yeah, it's another part of a phase of a life where you tend to learn a lot about your practice and about yourself, which is a great thing. And RMIT, the people that you mix with are just an amazing bunch of professionals. So yeah, it's been a great journey for me, and I hope to continue for a little while longer. And I'm not going to touch management.
Thank you, Michael. So I think that's all we've got time for today. So I'd like to thank all of my panelists, Kevin, Michael, Matthew and Sebastian, for helping me out today with uncovering a bit of what building is and what the big build could potentially mean for you. If you'd like to learn more about RMIT's building design, trades, surveying programs, or building and construction programs, or you'd like to watch the recorded version of this session later, and of course you want to see it again, please visit RMIT's Next Fest Open Day platform for more information. There's also some other wonderful recordings there from this week and the previous weeks as well. So thank you for joining us today at RMIT's talk, and we hope to see you all again very soon. Thank you very much. Bye.